So hello, everyone. My name is Tatiana, and this is Tech Talks by Collab Lab. Collab Lab is a volunteer-run nonprofit, and we provide skills training to early career developers. So we don't focus on teaching code, but we focus on teaching collaboration skills that are important in software teams. This is things like merging code, writing PR descriptions, pair programming, demos, retros, presenting your code, just things that developers do on an everyday basis. And today we are very happy to have Steve with us, who is a co-founder and CEO of Builder.io. And we're going to talk about building next generation apps with generative AI. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Steve.
Cool. Yes, let me pull up my screen. Hello, everybody. I need to, Tatiana, you need to give me screen share permissions or whatever it takes. It says it's disabled for me. There we go. Wait, nope.
Just made you a co-host.
Okay,
work.
perfect. That makes sense. That's why I suddenly see the admit people buttons. Okay, cool. There we go. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to zoom out a bit. Forgive me, I like to do presentations just with the drawing board. I think it's kind of fun. Forgive me for being a little janky. Everybody here use the chat. I want to make sure I'm answering questions that people have. I actually didn't prepare a lot of stuff to just say. What I wanted to do is show more than say. So it's going to be a lot better if y'all just ask questions. So let me get started, and I'll plug you all again, and I'll just keep my eyes on the chat, or people let me know if I'm missing anything. But so the purpose of this, I'm sure everybody here has seen ChatGPT. That's probably the most easily accessible generative AI that you could just get your hands on for free, and it's quite useful. It's quite strange in other ways, like it's good at giving fake information accidentally, but it's incredibly powerful, and it can do really wild things that you probably have seen. Maybe a friend mentioned something you could do. There was a South Park episode on this that I actually thought was pretty hilarious. You can see social media, people give examples of awesome things ChatGPT can do all the time. What they are is just large language models. So a pretty interesting set of techniques to essentially try to mathematically predict the next token in a sentence. So looking at a ton of text across the internet, a ton of source code on GitHub, and saying when you see a certain set of tokens are like parts of a word. So like, Apple would probably be one token, but something like unintuitive is usually two tokens because un negates intuitive. Anyway, it's just a thing. But anyway, they basically just try and predict if you see these tokens in a row, think like these words in a row, what word would come next. As weird as it sounds, when you can train a large enough model off with enough data, you can do pretty magic and amazing things. And so the thing I want to show you all is how incredibly easy AI is to work with now. I've been trying to build AI into products for the last decade. I actually majored in something called cognitive science at UC Berkeley. I dropped out to do startups, but back then cognitive science was this like neuroscience, psychology, computer science, AI, weird hybrid thing. And AI was very difficult to work with. AI has been very difficult to work with for the last decade, if not longer than that. And all of a sudden it's really easy. And I want to show you a really quick example. These few lines of code, which they have to be on a backend, they have to be behind an API or something, because you need to have a key that is private. You don't want to expose in your front-end application. But this is literally it. So whatever you can send to GPT and get an answer, you can do it over an API with just a few lines of code. All you need is an OpenAI key. And luckily, there's competitors every day coming out to compete with OpenAI. So Google launched a consumer product called Bard. I'm sure they'll turn that into an API because Google Cloud is a big part of their business. There's open source like what do they call it? Alpaca, like by Stanford. I actually don't know much about it. I just know I made a couple AI things and everybody asked about Alpaca. So it seems to be a cool new one. And then there's all kinds of open source developments on top of these things, like LangChain and AutoGPT, like people kind of chain and compose these things together, which is kind of interesting. But basically just think of it as an extremely simple way where I'll show you an example. If you have this Ask GPT function, you can simply construct a prompt and get a reply. And so let's take an example where you have an application that takes a text input and it has some input for what you want to do with the text. So the text is this sentence, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The prompt is translated to Spanish. And then you can use those things to construct essentially what you send to that API. The beauty is these large language models work with normal plain English. So you can just send it a chunk of text, and prompt engineering is a term you may hear. It's just the whole field of designing prompts to get good results. In my opinion, that prompt engineering back when we were in the days of like GPT-3 and before was pretty important. More and more, they're training these things with GPT 3.5 and 4 to not require engineering a prompt. You should be able to just say what you want and reliably get it. So generally speaking, you can create, for example, a simple translator app by just creating a prompt that just says, here's some text, please translate it to something else, and it gives you the text back. I'll show you some demos of this, but as weird as it sounds, this one little function that you can create can do a whole wide variety of use cases. So let me actually start demoing some things. What I want to do is I want to show you a few things that, so I basically made this little example function. This exists in the builder.io code base. This exists in a couple of different open source projects that I've created or contributed to. In a nutshell, this little snippet of code can do insane things. And let me give you some examples. So I'm going to go to the application that I first integrated this stuff into, and I'll show you what I did because I was starting to just do the easy things. So for anybody who's not aware, Builder is a headless CMS that gives you like a full drag and drop interface. So you make like React components, you drag and drop to make stuff out of them. And so let's take like an old version of our homepage. This is like the CMS interface. Oh, forgive me. It's crazy slow to load because I'm running a weird, something weird on my localhost that I should probably just turn off. Let me just turn that off so things actually generate, run a little faster. V3. Okay. So let's go into one of our home pages. Okay, cool. And so one of the first things that you might think of if you make like a whole visual drag and drop interface is using AI to like create and modify text. And so I kind of just threw together the tiniest little bit of code. Maybe I can like select multiple of these, or maybe I'll take, some text down here. So maybe I'll select multiple of these and sorry. Oh yeah, that was a piece of text I already did this on. Okay, let's do this. Let's grab this text block, and then all I did is made a little input that does exactly what I showed before. So this is essentially a place to put a prompt. The use case being, I want to modify this text. Maybe I want to make it more concise. And this text box literally just populates this code that I just showed you. So in this case, the text is whatever is in this text box. So like one click to publish is the text. And then the prompt is whatever I put in this box. So make it more concise, translate to Spanish, etc. All you do is combine them in a simple human readable way. And then when you hit the button, it will hit the API for OpenAI and bring it back a response. So in this case, I asked it to make it more concise, and I just rewrote it to be more concise. I can do that again and again all I want. Maybe I want to check it for grammar. What's really neat is all that changed was it put different words in. And it looks like my grammar was okay because nothing changed. Translation is fun. It doesn't do an amazing job at translation, but it's just interesting that suddenly you have translation in your app. And it does probably as well as like a Google Translate. I'm not an expert on that, but you get the idea. And so these magic buttons, we integrated throughout our entire product, and it's the simplest thing. Like I added this in a day and people were like, wow, you added AI to Builder in a day. It's like, yeah, it's not hard. You literally just send it to effectively ChatGPT over an API and you get a response back. Some other use cases, I can't remember what we have. We have like, you can elaborate on text, making it longer. You can change the tone, whatever you want. But where things get interesting is you can do a lot more than just modifying text. So let me show you briefly. I spun up, honestly, I think just a week ago, this little project I called AI Shell. All it does is, you can see the GIF here, and I'll show you some examples. All it does is you type in something you want to do. So if you're not really good at working with terminals, you can just write in plain human language, like plain English, what you want, and it'll generate a command for you and let you run it. So this is totally open source. You can go to it here in GitHub, and let's go here and I'll show you a simple example. You can just say, like, one I do a decent amount is I'll say like, so the command is AI, then you just type whatever you want. So you can say like kill process kill process on port 4000. The other day I had something running on port 4000. I couldn't figure out what it was to save my life. I do not know bash very well, even though I've been using it for like 10 years. I still don't know any of it. And so I could not remember to save my life this command. And this just told me it. And then I can click yes to run it. I can go back and modify. We can change it. Never mind. I won't show that. Let's just do this. We can also go like AI, tell me a joke. And then we can revise it and say like, fetch the joke from an API. There we go. And yeah, it'll generate an explanation in some of these cases. I think it's actually a bug. There's a config to turn explanations off or on, but I'll show you how this is made in a second. But anyway, if I'm not sure what this craziness I want to run, I can just read the human English explanation and then choose to run it. And then it did not do a particularly good job. It failed for some reason. Let's try one more time. AI, fetch me a joke. Oops, I had a typo, but yeah, it's going to work with it thinking it's crazy. Try this one more time. AI, fetch me a joke. Oh, there we go. Give me a dad joke. Sure. Where's the bin? Dad, I haven't been anywhere. I don't even get that. Whatever. Dad jokes are not my number one thing. But let me show you how this is made. It's extremely simple. And so let's actually open up the source code for this. And I might be able to show you pretty simply. But it's basically the same exact thing that I've been showing you. Let's see if I can find the exact OpenAI.create. There we go. So same exact code that I showed you already, creating a completion. Let's see where we're actually running this. We're doing fancy stuff to stream the response. I can talk about that in a moment. But where's our beautiful prompts? Full prompt, get prompts. There we go. So this is all we're doing. So we're creating a function. In this case, this is the revision prompt. Let's go to some other ones that are better. Let's do like the explanation. Yeah, this is a simple one. So you saw that the CLI could explain what a bash command is. So it's two steps. One is, maybe I could show you the first one too. Yeah, so the first one is we just want to get a prompt and we just give it some text that just says, just like you would type into something like ChatGPT. I will give you a prompt to create a single line command that you would want to run at a terminal. We add a few things dynamically, which is kind of cool. So we add a little bit more information about how to give us a good quality response. Usually this is just figured out from trial and error. So you start trying to get, results, and sometimes it does weird things. So you just add to the prompt like, hey, don't do these weird things. Make sure to always give me just the commands. Don't give me other information that I don't need, stuff like that. We started noticing that, sometimes your operating system is not taken into account. So you could say like install Python and it'll say like apt-get, which is a Linux thing, and I'm on Mac. So we're like, okay, we'll write a little bit of code that detects our operating system type, and we'll include that in the prompt. So when we send the prompt, it not only says, give me a bash command, some other information, it'll also say, hey, I'm using Mac OS, so make sure this works with Mac OS. And that's it. And then at the end, we just say, here's the prompt. Just this little bit of code and running that on that AskGPT function that I showed you will give us a bash command. And then the step 2, which we just have as a simple option, is, where did I put it? Yeah, the explanation, get explanation. There we go. Get explanation prompt. There it is. Yeah, so there it is. So all we have is this little script that basically says, hey, please describe step by step how this bash script works. And then we just put that in a string, and then we say, here's what the script is. And ta-da, it gives a really good example. I asked it to do some things like give me a list step by step. One thing that really helps in these cases is giving examples too. If you know what something needs to look like, you could say, hey, make it look like this. And there you go. And what's crazy is I even have a typo here. Like, how do you spell succinctly? That word is hard. And for some reason, it's always been able to figure that out. In fact, let's just push this. Fix typo. Ta-da. You'll be able to see this on GitHub. I'm being bad and not using branching because this project is only a week old. So I get to use some bad practices. We've already had a decent amount of contributors and it's been working pretty well. But anyway, so that's one other tool. Let me show you yet another thing. So one thing that I learned pretty quickly works pretty well is outputting code. And so here's another kind of interesting example that I put all this stuff together in the last couple of weeks. Like literally it was like, wow, you can do ChatGPT over an API. How can I integrate that to my apps? And like, what kind of use cases can that enable? So one thing that we added that's kind of cool is it's based on this idea that ChatGPT is really good at outputting code. So why don't we just go to chat.openai.com. Your session has expired. Let's go back, log in. Let's use my work email. And there we go. So a really good way to test if things will even work at all is put them in ChatGPT. So if you're like, hey, you know, one of the use cases that came up is like, well, what if we can allow people in Builder to generate whole new things? Well, the first question is like, what format could ChatGPT give me something so that I can import it into Builder? Luckily, Builder already knows how to import HTML code. We've like forever had this feature where you can just go in and where did we put it? Import options. Yeah, you can just import stuff from the web. So let's just go to Everlane blocks bots. Maybe we can take something from apple.com. That would be fun. Let's see if this works. Apple might block bots too. Well, there we go. Yeah, so I can go in and select something. It looks like images aren't coming through. That's probably via their CDN. Let's just try and take Apple's footer. And so Builder has this way to like convert HTML to be Builder editable. That was really cool, but like a lot of times what you want to import is more than just static stuff. So there we go. That's Apple's footer, pretty close. Couple little inherited style differences, but you get the idea. Oh, I have it importing in a weird mode, whatever. You get the idea. This is all imported and editable. This is cool, but like importing off people's websites, people usually tend to assume like the interactive things will come in, etc. So we built out the system for taking HTML and bringing it into this like visual editor. We didn't account for like what would actually produce this HTML. And so we started playing around with ChatGPT and we're like, hey, make me a nice looking hero in HTML. Make it look like it's on the homepage of everlane.com. I played around with GPT a lot. And oh yeah, you have to, let's see, okay. So I remember when going through it, I was like, okay, this is okay. It's giving me a hero. It doesn't include any of the styling. And it's giving me all this other text, which I don't need. So we can try again and be like, okay, I just want a hero and I want it to have all the styling and I don't need text. Please be sure to include all CSS styles needed in the code you give me. And don't include any other text. Just give me code. Let's try this again. Oh yeah, it'll always explain that it can't visit the website. So I always have to write like, I'm not asking you to visit the website. I'm just asking you to give me code that looks like it's on this website. Okay. So there we go. It'll ignore you for some things, by the way. Like it totally ignored me on this whole, like, don't give me any other text. You have to just fiddle with it until you find something where it reliably won't do that. Now let's go over here and I'll paste this in and hey, that looks pretty good. And it tried to generate an image. So one thing I did is I basically wrote something to ask GPT this and give me some HTML. I wrote something else. I basically told it, one thing I add to the prompt in Builder is I say like, use image.jpg for all images. And then later I post-process it. So I pull the code out, I replace all image.jpg with something else, like a better looking image, and then we import it in Builder. So basically, the fact that GPT could spit out code based on what you want allowed us to build this. So generate content. And so let's try it again, but integrate it into Builder. So I want to make a homepage hero section look like everlane.com. This is a common technique, by the way, is instead of just asking end users to make a prompt from scratch, if you find that a prompt format works really well, where you always say what you want, and then you say how it should look, and how it should look should be, website example or whatever, then just ask the users that. Ask them for what they want, ask them for how it should look, and then what generate. Now, one problem with these LLMs and generative AI is they tend to be slow. So streaming becomes really important. And I'll show you how I figured out a way to do streaming of stuff like this. But in Builder, I haven't integrated that yet because I just figured it out this weekend. Because that's its own weird thing, is how you stream designs as it's happening. I'll get back to that. But anyway, there we go. And now it made these different heroes. Pretty cool. And so these are just designs I can pick from. This one looks pretty clean and nice. So I'll just put it at the top here. And there we go. I have this nice hero. This makes essentially designing and building for the web a lot easier. everything's editable, hello world. And it was just that really simple technique. It was that technique of give me HTML and CSS. Builder already knows how to import HTML, CSS, that's editable. And that's all. And but then we asked ourselves, like, well, what else could you do with this? Like, let's say, for instance, can we tell ChatGPT, like, let's go in here and let's take this code it generated before. And can we say add, so can we do edits? Can we say like add another button to this code? And I'm just gonna paste the code. I don't even have to like put backticks around it. And there we go. I provided code and an instruction. And now it should add another button to this code. There we go. Luckily, it knew that these links, even though it's not a button tag, it's just an anchor tag. It knows that these are acting as a button. And okay, let's paste this into JS Fiddle to see what it came up with for us. There we go. It added another button. Haha, the hover effect. And so we're like, hey, we could do that in Builder. What Builder does is it's able to convert anything in the UI back to code. It has this kind of cool system to go bi-directional code and back. And so I'll just go in here and I'll type a command and say add another button. And so again, we're just creating a prompt. We're saying turn this thing I've selected into code, feed it into essentially GPT, and then feed the result back into Builder with the edits. Again, you'll notice it is slow. It's going to take like 30 seconds for it to add a button. So this is probably not something you want to do for like changing colors or changing sizes. It's a little slow for that. But when you have cases like adding a button where if you're not used to responsive design tools that can have a learning curve, there we go. We added another button. I can add a little bit of space. I can change this to be like, shop, new arrivals, whatever we want. And you could just say whatever you want after that. Like maybe I can go in here, I'll go a little slower and say, make one button a primary CTA, like call to action, and the other one a secondary. Make one button look like. Let's try this. And so it's kind of interesting. You can blend, like responsive layouts are hard, so have it build your layouts for you. Or you could, a little bit of design details, like, you don't usually want two buttons of equal weight right there in your face. You would like them to kind of have a slightly different weight. I want to show a couple other interesting things because I'm just hoping to share my learnings, etc. Oh, there we go. That's cool. They one button black, one button white. It might have made the other button outlined. It's surprisingly good. And anyway, I just want to remind you all, if you have questions on what I'm saying, please ask in the chat. I could ramble for another 30 minutes, no problem. But if you want like questions you have that maybe I've learned to help answer, please just ask. But anyway, so the other thing we asked ourselves, like one thing that's cool about Builder is you can also make interactive things, click a button, fetch something, blah, blah, blah. But we learned really quickly, just because you can make a drag and drop tool that can do really powerful things, doesn't necessarily mean people know how to learn it. In fact, learning a drag and drop system that has like 1,000 different buttons is quite hard. And sometimes it's easier to just learn to code, even though the goal was to make it so you didn't have to learn syntaxes and hard stuff to be able to do interesting, powerful stuff. And so then we asked ourselves, we realized something. Builder already supports essentially a React format where you can write sort of React code here, including state and use effect and fetching data and stuff like that. And so we're like, oh, can we just tell ChatGPT to generate a React component? Like, give me a React component that generates jokes. And then let's see, it's going to give us a dynamic joke generator. Yeah, there we go. So it can feed us React component. And so we're like, okay, that's awesome. Now what if we could suck that into Builder? Well, that already existed. So we added this experimental thing. I call it a mini app generator. These are different boxes because we just wanted to have slightly different prompts generated for these different use cases. But we can say like, I put a couple examples here. It's interesting how like this AI stuff kind of is kind of triggering new UX patterns. This idea of just like say what you want, but give people examples is something we're exploring, what makes sense UX wise. But here we go. I'm just going to generate something, a little joke generator app, and be able to visually edit it, and similarly kind of use prompts to modify it. So there we go. So I made a joke generator. I can click to get a joke, and it gives me a joke. That's super cool. I can pull open, let's see, the code. Actually, the code may give me some problems. Let me remove. Oh, there we go. Nope, we're fine. Oh, it's not letting me see the raw code. Well, that's fine. It's showing, basically, let's see. I think we can do this code view, code editor. There we go. So this is what it gave us. It gave us this ability to get a joke and I don't have my previewing working, but basically it's all rigged up to the UIs. But what's cool is we can change the look and feel of this too. We can say like, make this look like it was on apple.com. Usually the first time it does a joke generator, the joke generator is really ugly. So then I like show that you can make it look better. This is actually probably the best looking joke generator I've ever seen GPT generate. There we go. But now I just asked for a different look and feel and it gave me one. You could ask it to look like other websites and it can kind of emulate it, but that's pretty cool. The idea here is like, as these tools get smarter, can we have it generate even more elaborate things? Give me kind of full on apps I can visually edit and stuff like that. I think would be really neat. I want to show you one last thing, and then hopefully we can get a question or two in. But the next thing that came up is like, well, this is really cool for Builder, and we have a good amount of customers, but there's also a lot of people that use Figma. Builder's already had a Figma extension, and I was thinking like, well, we also made this plugin that can import HTML to Figma. So it's like, well, why don't we have it generate HTML and import that HTML into Figma? So I'm literally I was planning on releasing this today. One sec, where are you? Okay. So yeah, the Builder Figma plugin can turn Figma designs into like responsive code, like React code you could copy paste or import into Builder so that you can publish with a button click with the headless CMS. And it can also import things from the web, which is kind of what I just mentioned, give a URL or grab something from our Chrome extension and import it as editable fully in Figma. But I added this new AI section. So you give an OpenAI key, you give it your prompt. It's the same thing I showed. But what's cool about this is, let's say a product page. What's cool about this, unless I didn't break it, did I break it? I might have broken it. Oh, I think I did. Hold on. The cool thing won't work unless I turn this back on. Okay, 1 second. I'm gonna close out of that. Because the interesting thing is, the reason why, so if I go back to my ChatGPT examples, the reason why it doesn't feel painfully slow is because it's showing me one character at a time as it's ready. If it gave me a loading spinner and nothing I could see until it was all done, then it would feel horribly slow to load. And that's what you saw with Builder. It was pretty slow to load because you don't see anything as it's going. And Figma, come on,
Steve,
let me exit.
while we wait, we got one question. Are
Perfect.
you validating OpenAI's API responses in any way?
Yes, good question. So generally speaking, I'm sorry, Figma is being buggy on me. Let's quit Figma and start this over. And so it depends on what you mean. Let me kind of tell you exactly what we're doing. So from a normal API call, there's only two things that could happen. One is you get text back, and two is an error. So always make sure to handle the errors, right? The errors could be 404. That happens if you send something like an incorrect model identifier, which actually it's probably something that'll happen to any of you. I just hit a weird edge case with that. 429 is a common one. 429 means you haven't set up billing correctly. That's a really common one. So just make sure to handle those. And then when it comes to validating, so the way I get around, so generally speaking, yes, you're going to want to check to make sure what they gave you is what you expected, because there is variability. Now, OpenAI APIs. There is, let's go to the chat completion. There's this thing called temperature, which I never fuss with, but people keep telling me I probably should. So one of the options you can send to the API, and I'm not seeing a nice, easy example. Whatever. There's a number you can send that increases how much variability it'll give. So if I recall correctly, low number means it'll almost always give you the exact answer every time. A high number means it'll get very, very creative with different types of responses. If you need a very specific type of response back, like there's only one type of thing that's valid and other things are invalid, turn the temperature down. But the other thing I found is I often will say something like, let's go back to this example. Please reply with only the React components surrounded by 3 backticks. Really commonly, the GPT APIs will give you code surrounded by 3 backticks on either side, just like in a GitHub README, because it looks at a lot of GitHub READMEs. And so what you can do is you can parse it out. So you get the response, and then you look for 3 backticks, you pull out what's inside. If what's inside looks like code, great. If there's nothing or there's no backticks, then yeah, you can mark it as invalid. So long-winded way of saying most of the time you don't need to do any fancy validation. If you want to, I would suggest telling GPT exactly the format you want back. And if you don't see that exact format, then you could assume it's invalid. Currently, all these features I've added are in beta because sometimes they will fail because I'll just give some weird response, and just make sure you forward that to the user and say, something weird happens, try again. The nice thing is I'm finding users are learning because they have access to LLMs directly through ChatGPT and some other stuff coming out. They're starting to learn these things are very, very kind of magical, and also, mostly but not always reliable. And I think users are kind of comfortable and aware with that. I'll pause there because I rambled a lot. Tim, does that answer your question? Or if you want to ask a follow-up question, please feel free to, and I'll elaborate in any different direction. Otherwise, I'll keep at it. Perfect. Okay. So going to Figma, so let me show you the thing I added for Figma. This is based off an experiment and builder. There we go. So this is going to be loading from my local, which they run it in some weird like interpreter that's incredibly slow. So when this eventually opens, I can show you, okay, sweet, dev-env, perfect. Okay, so I'll put a prompt, I'll say a product page, and where are we having issues? Oh, my local API is not running. Hold on. I want to show you the cool thing. Yes, of course, they decided to end. Oh, I know why they ended. Remember that demo where I said kill process on port 4000? I just killed my APIs. Anyway, let's get them back running again. I think this should, come on. They take a little while to boot up. We use Google Cloud Functions for Builder. There we go. Trying again. But that's a good example of make sure to show your users error messages when you are not able to connect your API. This gets wildly more complicated when you support streaming. So this is an example of streaming. You kind of see the design coming into place in real time. This is like way more fun, in my opinion, than just a loading spinner. And I'm so glad I'm added it, and I'm annoyed that I only thought to do this after I'd already built this into Builder. I'd have to go back and revisit it. But yeah, so we could ask for something else. Let's do like a sign up page that looks like it's on let's do apple.com. It's really bad at coming up with images that would be on apple.com, but there we go. It's not too bad. It's kind of cool. It's like you're seeing the thing design in real time. I'll explain what's actually going on in a minute. This is all actually open source, at least the UI code for this. That's kind of neat. Anybody have any prompts they suggest that I add? I would love if somebody would just feed me a prompt. At least that way you know that I'm not.
Website or something.
What did you say? A music website?
Yeah, like that looks like Spotify or something, or
Okay.
podcast website. Yeah,
a podcast website style. Let's do a homepage in the style of Spotify.com. I've never tried this. A lot of my things are e-commerce. There we go. Podcast website. Welcome to our podcast. That's not too bad. Wow, that's actually this is actually kind of decent. Dang, this is not bad. Wow, it keeps getting better actually. Well, that's cool. I'm so glad I asked. That was a great suggestion, Meek. Let's choose. It's still finishing up the last little touches. Look at that. This is cool.
It's definitely cool to see it happen in real time.
Right? Oh, I got to add that to Builder. I only have so much time. I don't know which one it's still generating on. This is good. Oh, I see. It's adding quite a lot of sections to this page. Maybe I should have it automatically scroll to the bottom so that it shows you. Yeah, I should do that. I need to write myself some notes. Anyway, which one do we like? I kind of like 1 and 3. That one's got a lot going on. Now let's do this one. Okay, so now we can import it. So what it did is it generated HTML. We showed you the HTML there, and now it's converting the HTML to Figma layers, which is something we had already built in the past. I don't know why the HTML to Figma layers is so slow. Something to improve in that. But eventually we'll get something in here. I think it's transferring of the images, which is ironic because the images, I have them generate a very small size. But eventually we should get, let's see if my API didn't do anything wrong. Nope. Oh, nope. It's running. There we go. And one thing I did too. So in order to make it nice and fast, let's get rid of this. So this is our stuff. This is our cool page. Awesome. We have a podcast website. I added one thing. I have it generate the images at a very small size. I'll show you the image generation in a second. And so I have it so that they just come in with a layer blur because it just is super pixelated and weird looking. The idea is you're going to replace it with your own images anyway. I I guess I could add to the plugin like Dolly image generation to get new images. That'd be cool. Maybe I should do that. Because I added that in Builder. Like, let me show you one other thing really quickly. Let's add a background image. So so I showed you that code for AskGPT. Dolly 2 is basically just as easy to use as GPT. So Dolly 2, OpenAI has an image generation API, the same way we said just generate a chat completion, which means just, give me a response from this human language text. You can generate images. And so you can look up their docs, but it's equally simple. It's just like, here's a prompt, give me some images, and it'll feed them to you. That'd be kind of cool to add to the Figma plugin. I feel like Figma plugins for that probably already exist. But anyway, I'll describe in a moment how I do the streaming thing, and I'll show you some code. Come on, this is a good example. Images you can't show people in real time because OpenAI just doesn't support that. Maybe they'll add in the future, but there we go. This is just images based off of prompts, and I think this one's kind of nice. There we go, pretty neat. I should add that into the Figma plugin. But that's basically what I'm doing. And so what I'm doing here, OpenAI can stream the response to you. So basically, when you do that AskGPT, you can also specify, give me a stream. Streams are a lot more complicated to work with than normal, hit an API, get a response. And I'll give you a sense of what the code looks like. Do not make fun of my code. I literally just had someone open an issue in the AI Shell project saying that my code was bad, which was funny because they were commenting on the one part of the code that I didn't even write, which was like, people are rude in open source land. But anyway, everybody's got opinions on what quality code looks like, and they can be pretty opposing. Let's go to this AI import on submit. Okay, so streaming. And so I had to wrap one thing to emphasize, like I said before, the private keys you use in OpenAI, you can't include those on the front end. So you have to make those calls on a back end. So you need to make your own API that does the actual OpenAI.create chat completion and passes the API key, and you just forward the response to the client. The way you do that, let me actually just show, I can show an example. Let's go to Builder, let's go to the AI to Figma API. Cool. And okay, I actually happen to be right on it. So this is where, when we ask for the chat completions, we basically request a stream. So we're saying OpenAI, give us a stream, and then we're iterating using async iterators. This stuff is advanced. If it's making no sense, please just don't worry about it. Streaming is not a critical thing, especially when just getting started. But basically, we're iterating over, and we're essentially writing we're writing the response like one chunk at a time. So as opposed to, you normally use Express where you're like, response.sentence, here's some JSON or whatever. Under the hood, it's actually, using response.write. Here we're doing it manually. We're writing a piece at a time. Usually you do that by kind of line by line, sending like a piece of data at a time. And so I'll show you what this looks like on the other side, which is, I think it's AI. Oops, this one. This is kind of interesting, by the way. This is just some cool web API stuff that aren't well known. But basically here, instead of saying, so when you do a fetch call, you're usually probably, after you do await fetch blah, 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 you're probably saying const JSON equals await res.json, response.json, right? That's what most people are doing, or response.text, which you can do. And that's just going to wait for the entire response to stream in and then give you one big chunk of text or one big JSON object. But alternatively, you can actually say, no, every chunk that you get, feed it to me directly. I want to be doing something with that in real time. So for those cool Figma interactive previews, we are streaming HTML little bit by bit, but we're not waiting for it all. We're actually, every time we get a little bit, we're displaying it. So the way you do that is you can, instead of like, getting text or JSON, you can actually do a get reader. And this is some type of browser API that allows you to read the text incrementally. And then using a text decoder, just turn the UTF-8 format into, plain text here. And then what's interesting is, one thing you do is you use, I actually pulled this technique from Google Chrome at a blog post on, but you actually use an infinite while loop, which you probably learned in class never, ever, ever to do. Well, there are extremely rare circumstances where it's useful, and this is one of it. Because basically, there's a fancy way with async iterators to like do this in the future, but the browsers don't support it yet. Right now, we basically want to say, keep looping through the responses until it's done. And so this is where we're basically saying await reader.read. So every time we call .read, it returns a promise and it's waiting for the next chunk. It feeds me the chunk, and then I start doing something with it. In most cases, you send the chunks in a format like text, like this, like it's line by line, like a piece of JSON at a time. So like, let's say contents, and then there's like one character, right? So for HTML, so this is actually what it comes in as: one line at a time, data, and then it'll be like div, and then close tag. This is kind of what streaming HTML, at least in the way I have it set up, which is similar to what OpenAI does, looks like. And then so it reads through this stuff, and it keeps kind of constructing, it parses out the contents. We do it in a fancy way because we're requesting multiple in parallel. And so there's like an index. It'll say like, this is for index 1, because we're requesting 4 results at a time. So it'll give you one of the designs and then another one, and, you know, kind of interweaves them all. But anyway, we're basically just reading the HTML, and then we're saving it. I'm using Reactix to just save it. And then we're just displaying it one piece at a time. So the other thing we're doing down here, which is also something you're probably told don't ever do. Where is it? Previews.map. There we go. We're doing something that you're told never to do. Dangerously set inner HTML. There are use cases for that too. And when you're streaming an HTML response, and you already know through other means that this response doesn't have like bad content, like scripts and stuff that would execute that you probably wouldn't want, then we just feed it in. So basically, as we get HTML character by character, we feed it in there. And that's what creates the illusion of the AI designing in real time. But the reality is it's just kind of printing the HTML. And it's kind of fun to see what a very slow HTML stream looks like. Like, if you're not already familiar, browsers do stream HTML already. Like they do, you know, they can load partial HTML documents. Like you've probably noticed this. If you go and just type in HTML, like let's type something totally broken, like let's say we have a hero and we want it to have like background color red, padding 20 pixels. And let's say we do some kind of nonsense like hero, and then let's say there's no close tag yet. Hello, we have a button. Hello. So let's say we have this. This is not valid HTML whatsoever. If you're writing JavaScript and you had incomplete JavaScript, the browser would just say, let me get it Grammarly, this is annoying. The browser would just say, that's invalid JavaScript. With HTML, doesn't matter. You can have totally invalid HTML. Well, it does matter, like you shouldn't ship HTML like this, but this is what HTML looks like as it's streaming. It's not done yet. We haven't shipped all the close tags. But the browsers are like, yeah, it's fine. We know that this is going to have to close at some point. So they basically implicitly add all the closing stuff to make this valid for me. And that's why we can stream it. So we're actually inserting HTML that's not done yet because the browser knows how to figure it out. Now, that happens to you every day when you download websites. It streams it in and it renders it in. But what's funny is nobody has a server that's nearly as slow as machine learning generating one character at a time. So what you basically saw, and I'll show you again just so it makes more sense. Let's go back to my extension. Of course, it could take forever, but when you see it kind of trickling in the design, what you're essentially seeing is a really, really, really slowed down version of HTML streaming. What happens on all your websites just slowed down by a factor of like 10,000. So let's do one more. Any other prompt ideas? It'd be fun to try one more. If anybody's got a random idea, put it in the chat or just shout it out. Somebody give me something. I really don't have any ideas, so we're gonna have to sit and watch me do nothing until somebody contributes some random idea. Anime website, there we go. That looks like, give me an example of an anime website. Like what can I type in here that, maybe a show, maybe no website to, somebody give me an example website. Anime website like everlane.com would be interesting, but odd. If I don't get any examples, I'm just gonna hit send. Okay, anime website looks like everlane.com. The title is anime website, there you go. But there we go. See how the text is all kind of coming in? Again, this is just a normal HTML stream. It's just coming in really, really slowly. And the other interesting trick I do here too is I fetch images in parallel. And as soon as the images come in, I do some like regexing to insert them in, which we're running out of time, so I won't go into that. It's quite nuanced and stuff like that. In fact, I want to use one more chance to kind of invite people to ask questions. Otherwise, I'll show one other really weird thing that I'm messing with. Yeah, so the last thing I'll just go into, if no other top of my questions, but please just throw it in while I'm talking, is the last thing that's I think interesting going on in this world. So first again, Vol, just to recap. Anything you can do in ChatGPT, you can do in products you build. Go get an API key and you can hook it in. The use cases are infinite. If you can ask GPT to do it, you can make it a user flow in your product. Translate text, generate code, make your text simpler, whatever. If you use Notion, that's basically what Notion does. Notion has AI features to change your text, rewrite it, generate more. It's just using those APIs. Same with GitHub Copilot. If you've used GitHub Copilot to auto-complete your code, it's doing the same thing. Why? Right here, I can go in and it'll suggest some stylus. It is the same thing. It's like, here's some code. What code would you insert there? You can make that into a prompt, test it with ChatGPT. If it works reliably, work it into your product. But what's really interesting is what people are starting to do now. So OpenAI is adding plugins to ChatGPT to like do actions, like book you a restaurant or whatever. And there's this whole emerging field of kind of like research going on around LLM agents. The idea is like, because you can ask GPT anything and give you an answer, what if we asked it to do something or asked it to describe how to do something? Or even more, like what if we give it an exact format? This kind of has to do with that validation question. So there's this thing called AutoGPT. There's two. There's a thing called LangChain. LangChain is pretty interesting. Where is it? That's the LangChain. These things are growing in popularity rapidly. Like it was first created like a month ago and it's already 24,000 stars. This is a cool way to chain things together. So get the GPT techniques to do more powerful things by chaining multiple things. So like the way they describe it is kind of confusing. It's like give GPT access to Google, which is like, what does that even mean? Like, sure, it makes sense at face value, but it's like, what does it actually mean? And I can't speak to the implementation details, but the idea is like, could you make smarter? Oh yeah, agents. Oh, I need to try. I didn't know they support agents. I need to mess with that. Okay, but let me show you AutoGPT. So anyway, this is like, what if you can make these pieces you can connect to GPTs where they can add additional functionality, API integrations, etc., and you just have one simple layer to ask it questions that it could answer using Google search results or whatever, which usually just means a scripted technique of you ask a question, you first ask GPT to answer, like let me see if I can give an example or probably explain it better. So let's say you wanted to have a script look up some information and answer it. The way the script could work is you could first say, like say you wanted to do research on dogs. You could first ask GPT, what website would you go to do research on dogs? Just give me the exact URL. So, okay, it gives you this. So then you could write a script that goes to Google and it pulls the HTML for that website, and then it feeds that to GPT. So it does something like this, grab the source code and say, here is a web page. And at the bottom, like, oops, it's going to be like, what are you even asking me? I meant to hit Command Shift, whatever. Let's go back. You could basically, I'll just describe it. You could say, here's a web page. Please summarize this for me. And then you kind of package that into a script, and now it can in theory do a thing. It more describes what it wants. You have something else go do the thing, and it feeds the results, and then it has GPT do something else. And now instead of just saying, I could go in GPT and say, what is the best dog breed? But if it needs up-to-date, it's going to just make something up. But if it needs up-to-date information, you could have these things be chained and say like, okay, fetch this, summarize it, tell me what this website says is best, and it'll have up-to-date, maybe more accurate information. LangChain is this idea of what if you made all these plugins, you could plug them together and do these things. But AutoGPT is the other interesting one. I really need to check out this documentation on agents. But AutoGPT is this weird thing that's like, well, what if you made GPT agents that were autonomous? The idea is you could put in a prompt like start a business, and it'll like complete a response of like, well, to start a business, you really should research good business ideas. And so then it'll just go ahead and do that. Like it actually will go research business ideas and come back with some results. And then it'll ask itself essentially, based on these results, what is the next step to starting a business? And it'll say to itself like, well, next step to starting a business is, figure out a strategy for the business. And then it'll say to itself like, how would you make a strategy? And then it'll just make one. And anyway, the idea is like the default prompt for Auto GPT is this idea. What if you just said start a business? And like I ran it and I let the script run for a couple hours, and it basically started making a blog, and it researched blog topics. It came up with blog topic ideas. It started writing draft posts, and it had this idea. And again, I put all this in air quotes. These things don't actually think or understand or have ideas. It's all statistical probabilities. You could argue that's how our brains work too, but I'll stay away from the philosophy. It basically is able to sort of like decide through all this stuff, actions to take. It takes the actions, and it can end up with these interesting results. Often these things go haywire and just like give you weird, they just go in a loop and nothing ever comes of it. But it's pretty interesting. And that's the last thing I've been dabbling with, is creating AI agents. Do I have my little project here? The idea being, yeah, I do. What port is it on? I think it's on I'm building it with
Did the
Qwik.
business project ever get to the point of like registering a business somewhere?
No,
Monetize this.
and I don't think it's capable of that yet. And that's what I'm trying to solve with this. So basically, it just creates like this theoretical business. It won't actually write anything to the external world. It will save things to a database. So like its history and its research, it'll save to a database. Like here's all the articles I researched. It'll create summaries and save that. And it'll be able to like combine the research into new prompts to like summarize. And I think it probably started drafting blog posts and maybe started saving that to a database. But no, and so that's where it's a perfect lead into like what I'm working on with this wacky thing. Ignore that it's using Puppeteer. Hold on, sorry. Ignore that open table is open. Oops, I need to edit one thing. Hold on, I'll show what this is, and I promise that'll be the last of the weird stuff I have to show. Okay, let's do this. Actions you can take. Nope, that's not what I want. So this is just all me constructing prompts. I'll explain it in a moment. Text, click selector, homepage autocomplete. Sure. Why don't we just stop it here? Okay.
Have you experimented any with audio or like the audio generation of like models and stuff like that yet?
I haven't, but I think it's fascinating. And my understanding is that the images and audio works the same way as the text. It looks at audio and just kind of like what frequency usually comes after this other one. Essentially, I'm kind of overly summarizing here. And same with images. It's kind of like what pixel value usually comes after these. It's a really clever way of just taking the same techniques and applying it to more medium. So yeah, nothing used on my side. I've heard examples of audio, and I've never heard such horrific music before. The image examples are surprisingly good. If you've seen like Midjourney, text examples are surprisingly good. Audio's been bad, but have you tried it yourself before?
Yes, actually, I just created a audio model of myself and I sent it to my friends, and they're like, "Yo, can you really sing like that?" And I've done like the Rihanna model. I have like a collection of all the models, just been collecting them, and they are so good.
Oh,
They're
that's amazing.
great. So I want to like maybe build on top of like that because I kind of know the process right now.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that that's come a long way since the last time I've tried it. I've definitely heard like the voice replication is pretty good. I used to make music, and I can sing badly, sometimes okay, and that would have really helped my music to actually have good singing. And here, let me show you. Okay, so I have this weird, really funky thing going on, this really long prompt, but the idea of this prompt to make like an agent is this. It's so funny. So let me just start you with the basics. All it is a prompt that just says like you browse the web and take actions in a web browser. I list previously actions taken. I'll explain that in a moment. I'm just saying the prompt is, and I should change this date to something else. Let me actually change it in my code. This was the previous bug I ran into, is I was picking an absurd date. Like what month is it now? April. So let's go 4/22. Okay. Let's go back. Please ignore this. I'll explain what's going on with that craziness in a second. Okay, cool. So it's just saying, actually, let me delete this. Okay. Okay. Long prompt, it just says you browse the web and take actions in a web browser. Previous steps you took were nothing. I'll explain that in a second. The prompt is book me a reservation at Dosa for 2 people at 7 p.m. on this date. And then I give it actions it can take. It's allowed to take these actions. So you can load a website, like navigate to this URL. You can click something, like click in some selector. You can input something, like text in a text box, or you can ask questions. So you can reply with like asking me a question, because previous examples of this, like they would ask me, well, like, what food do you want to eat, if I didn't specify that in the prompt or whatever. And then I'm going to delete this. I'll explain it in a minute. And that's it. And then I just say, what next action would you take? So from the information it has right now, which is basically nothing, here's a prompt, here's actions you can take. I want you to book me a reservation. What will you do? And I give it some examples. Give me an array of actions. What it should do, it should say, yeah, there we go. So it's saying the first action it should take is navigate to opentable.com. And now it's hallucinating. I should really just tell it not to. It's making up what these are. These things are not valid. So I'll show you where I had better success. Only one. There we go. I had better success only asking for one action at a time. So let me go back and fix up that prompt. Previous steps. Oh, I have to clear this. I know we're 2 minutes from time here. Okay, cool. I'm going to delete this really quickly too. Keep that in my clipboard. Okay. So this is a redo. So sorry. All I'm saying, I probably don't need the previous steps, whatever. Same thing I told you before, and I'm asking to take one action. Okay. So the one action is, it's asking for multiple anyway. This is what a lot of debugging these GPT things is asking for things and it not giving you what you want, and figuring out ways to massage the words till it does. But let's just parse out the first action. So basically, if the action is go to a website, what I do is I just paste that over here and say, okay, you took this action, and then I'll feed it what was on the website. The idea is, and I'll add back this and this. There we go. The idea is like, okay, you give it a prompt, it gives you an action. You take the action with code, like gather website information, and then you feed that into a new prompt. And so here's the new prompt. It's like, okay, so far you've gone to this website. The website contents is this. And then you say, well, what should you do now? And then what it'll do is it will say, there we go. It says type in text into this text input because it saw that from the HTML, and then enter in a date. There we go. So it's saying click on the exact date that I want. Then do choose the party size. I think I asked for 2, so that's correct. So I believe it's mostly correct here. And then the idea is, and I know we're at time, so I'll wrap up in 1 second. The idea is, I don't have this automated right now. I'm actually just copying and pasting things just while I'm testing. The idea this would be automated. You just say like, take those actions, or you just don't click anything. It just takes actions and continues. But now you tell it, here's the next actions to take. Did I break something? Some kind of, oh yeah, let's go. Why are you not happy with that? Unnecessary escape. Okay, whatever. Actually, no, that actually is important. Okay, cool. And then, oops, of course I'm breaking things. That's okay. Well, I wish I could show you the second part. I'm hoping to open source this next week, but basically the idea is those actions would then be automated. So what's supposed to happen, and I'm sure I just copy and pasted something wrong. Oh, I know what I did. There we go. Let's try this again. There we go. Now it's actually going to automate those things. So you see it chose, yeah, it's that's so weird. So it took the actions it said to take. So I just said, I know this is the most confusing demo ever. I've never practiced it and it's half broken. But basically, I just said, you need to book me a restaurant. I told it what it's allowed to do. It said, go to this website. And so I fed it the HTML for that website. And then it said, okay, fill out this input, this input, this input. And if I click, the next step would obviously be let's go. And yeah, that's where I'm at with this. I'm hoping that I could actually get it to a point where you just say, book me a restaurant. I don't have to tell anything else. If it needs to know how many people or whatever, it'll tell me. And I made like a little UI for that. So if it responds with ask, it'll just show me a prompt. What do you want to blah, 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 blah. It'd be cool to hook it up to Siri. So it just actually just says it to me. And I just say, so I just say, book me a thing. And it's like, what this? I just say it. And then it just goes through the steps and does it. Anyway, that's a very confusing demo of what these agents are. These are literally just people like myself and smarter people out there just making this up. You're like, hey, LLMs could generate text. What kinds of things can we ask them to do? And what kind of weird stuff can we do with that? And when people get agents pretty well figured out, it's unclear how well they'll work, but I'm pretty excited about it. So I'll shut up there. Any final questions? Or I know we're over time, so we can all depart here as well.
This was good. Thank you.
It doesn't look
Of
like
course.
there are any more questions, but this was really cool, Steve. Thank you so much. It's amazing to see what you can do with just like a little bit of code in ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's super easy. I assume you all will share the recording somewhere. People could pull the code off the screen grab. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, absolutely. So either later tonight, or if not tonight, then tomorrow, it's going to be posted on the Collab Lab website and on our YouTube. I'll also send an email to everybody who RSVP to this meetup talk, so that you know it's available.
Cool. Perfect. Well, this was fun. I hope everybody watching enjoyed it and I didn't ramble too much, and I hope everybody builds some cool stuff with LLMs. It's fun.
This was great. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Thank you all. See ya.
Take care. Bye.